Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this new webinar in the Cybiant webinar series. My name is Jan-Willem Middelburg, and it's going to be a pleasure to present to you today to how to design an e-government portal in Summit AI. Before we get started with the webinar today, just let us know a couple of things on more of the housekeeping rules of this webinar. First of all, you should know that this session is recorded. So if you want to review anything after this webinar, or you have any additional things that were not clear, you can always review it. If you've registered for this webinar, you will automatically receive a link with the recording. So there's nothing that you need to do. We will also post the video on the website. So if you want to review it, you can after a while. Then we are with a number of participants in the course. So what's really good to do is if you have any questions, the Zoom platform provides the functionality that you can raise your hand in order to ask a question. So that is in the box which you see, and there you can chat with me directly. If you would like to have any questions or you would like to request to speak, I can make you a panelist and then you can review the questions and you will get microphone access. By default, all participants have been placed in mute. So if you would like to participate in a more active way, please raise the hand and I will promote you to a panelist. Last but not least, we always try really hard to improve the quality of our webinars and to come up with new and innovative topics. So at the end of this webinar, you will receive a short survey with some questions about your experience. And we will also ask you which other topics you would like to prefer to see in the future. So please take a moment to fill this one out because we really do read them and we would be very keen to know which topics would be of interest to you for one of our next upcoming sessions. So let's take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Jan-Willem Middelburg and I'm one of the co-founders of Cybiant based in Kuala Lumpur. We started Cybiant with the mission to make a more sustainable world for the next generation through automation. And what I will show in the session today is exactly that. How can we make government services more efficient through the use of automation? I've been in this field for over a decade. And in 2017, I published the Service Automation Framework, which is a book that talks about automation. So many of the concepts that we will discuss in this particular webinar will be coming out of the content of that book. I regularly do talks like this or on conferences, which is a little bit different in these days, about automation. So if you would like to reach out to me after the session today, or you have any additional questions, on the left-hand side, you find my contact details. You can most easily reach me either through LinkedIn or Twitter, and you'll also find my email address at the bottom of this slide. So please feel free to reach out to me at all times if you have any questions about the things that we discussed today. So let's review what is the topic and the agenda for today. So as you know, this webinar is called How to Design an E-Government Portal in Summit AI. And from the title alone, you can deduce a number of things. What I will present to you today first is to give you a brief overview and an introduction to service automation. So what does service automation actually mean? Why is it so important? And why has it been growing very rapidly in the last couple of years? We will then dive and make a bridge towards the service provider role of the government. As you will probably know, governments do a lot of things in order to make sure that countries function. And one of the things that is most important is that they provide services to citizens. So we will dive a little bit further into that particular role and subsequently explain how automation can help in that role. So in the next topic, we will talk about the automated delivery of government services. And we will talk about the fact that although a lot of governments still provide services in a manual fashion, that they now can provide these through self-service portals. After that initial introduction, which is a bit more theory-based, we're going to make it a little bit more practical. So within this practice session, I will showcase you the 6 stages of the design of an e-government portal and what you should walk through in terms of if you want to automate your services. We will end this session today with a live demonstration in Symphony Summit AI, where we will showcase to you how you can design a self-service portal very easily and within a matter of hours. Obviously, this webinar is not long enough to cover that completely, so I'm just going to show you some highlights and will present to you how especially the self-service portal can be configured. At the end of this webinar, we will open up for questions and answers, and we will host an interactive Q&A webinar. So if you have any questions about any of the things that I'm presenting, please write them down and ask them in the chat box, and I will come back to answer all of the questions towards the end of the webinar itself. So we have a full agenda for today. The webinar will take between 35 to 40 minutes, and depending on the number of questions. So let's just dive right into it. Let's start with a very important question. I have listed a number of companies on the screen here, ranging from transportation services to music to videos on demand and insurance and travel. You might at first think, what do all of these companies have in common? Because they provide so many different things. But if you think a little bit closer and a little bit deeper about these companies, there's two important things to notice. The first important thing to notice is that all of these companies are service providers. All of them provide services, which are intangible things. They don't sell you products. There's nothing you can order from their websites that will become yours. You will receive a service experience from them. The second key takeaway that I would like you to take from this slide is that all of these companies provide services in an automated fashion. I'm pretty sure that all of you will have used the services of one of these providers in your daily life. And I'd like you to ask yourself the question, did you ever speak to any of the people that work at one of these companies? There's a very high likelihood that you haven't. And the reason is because all of these companies provide automated services. You go to their platform or their application, you book, order, receive the service, they swipe your credit card, you receive an automated bill, and you can complete the service. However, what that means is that by definition, these companies are able to service large amounts of people, and they do it in a very easy way. And now I would like you to think a little bit further and ask yourself the following question. What would it mean if a government could do something like that? What if it was as easy as making a booking on booking.com or ordering a taxi through Grab to request your parking permits, your driver's license, or for instance, something as simple as your marriage certificate or your passport? Unfortunately, nowadays, this is still not possible. So what we will try to do in this webinar today is to present you with the steps on how a government could also start to apply these concepts of service automation and provide automated services to their citizens. So how will we do that? Well, first things first. In order to start delivering automated services, you will need to know what an automated service is. So I've given you a short definition of the definition of service automation based upon the service automation framework and the book that I've written about service automation. First and foremost, service automation is the automated delivery of a service. That might sound very straightforward, but it's not if you think a little bit deeper about it. If we provide automated services, it means there is no human involvement at the back end. It means that all of the processes that are required to deliver a service are manually scripted into a workflow so that they are delivered to customers when they request that. And that brings us immediately to the second point. An automated service is characterized by the fact that it is always based on the request of a user. And that's something important to realize, because every new request will be triggered by a user itself. And if you think about that a little bit deeper, you will see that that is very often the case. If you order a taxi through your Grab app, it will only come if you specifically request it. And the same is true for government services. You will only receive a new parking permit or a new marriage license, or for instance, a new passport at the moment you request for that particular service. So in service automation, you should know that any request is based upon the autonomous requests of users. So the process doesn't start otherwise. Third element of an automated service is that you will need to have some kind of technology platform or a digital app in order to deliver the services. We just mentioned that within service automation, every service is delivered automatically. And the only interface a user interacts with is through a technology platform. And that is really where we will request services. So in this session today, I will be giving you a short demo of what is a self-service platform, and we will also showcase you some of the technology with which you can build your own self-service platform. We will do that towards the end of this session. Last but not least, service automation is aimed at providing an optimal user experience. And what that really means is that it's not just enough to provide a service once. We want people to come back and start reusing more services. And in order to do that, the whole user experience needs to be good. With automated services, the only interaction between a user and the service provider comes through the self-service portal. So if the self-service portal doesn't function correctly, or there are bugs, or it is slow, then people will not really come back. So we need to find a way in order to design a portal that people actually like to use, and it provides an optimal user experience. So these are 4 of the core characteristics of service automation, and it's really good to start understanding that before we dive into the actual design itself. You subsequently might ask yourself the following question. Well, why would companies and governments specifically be interested in service automation? Is it not just easier to keep things as they are? Most governments today provide their services through different offices which are located throughout the country, or they provide service counters where you can go to request a new driver's license or request a new passport. All of these services that governments provide are highly decentralized. So what that means is that you will very frequently need to go to different locations, wait in line, and they only operate between certain times a day. So typically between 8 and 5 p.m. And that brings us to the business drivers for service automation. Why should you actually think about automating your government services? Well, first and foremost, service automation facilitates a scalable business model. What does that mean? It means that if you automate your service, it really doesn't matter whether your service 10, 100, or 1,000 people per hour, because the workflow in the backend will be executed automatically, and people will receive the services the moment they request it. The second key business driver is that service automation assists companies in making data-driven decisions. So if you direct all of the traffic towards the website, towards the self-service portal, you can collect all the data of all the decisions that people make. And based upon that data, you can start to make your improvement project, and you can start to improve the services that you're currently offering. You will see exactly who will click on which particular service. You will also see where people get stuck. And based upon that data, you can make improvement decisions. Third of all, we already talked about this, service automation is user-centric. So that means you need to design the services from a user perspective, and that will provide an optimal user experience. Fourth, and this is also obviously one of the main CFO arguments, service automation is more cost efficient. Whereas nowadays, a lot of people do unnecessarily manual labor, automated services can provide a way more cost efficient delivery model because things get done automatically. You need to design them well the first time, but after that, you can run them thousands of times with limited additional costs. And last but not least, in most cases, service automation provides a framework for consistently exceeding user expectations. Suppose you lose your driver's license over the weekend, or you would like to request a document in evening hours. Most government offices are then not open. So by providing a self-service portal, you will be able to provide services 24/7, every day of the week, and people can decide by themselves when they would like to consume a service. So how do we do that? We will use the service automation framework as a model in order to automate services. The session today is not long enough to go through all of the different components of the service automation framework, but you should know that the service automation framework is a step-by-step model through which you can automate services, and it consists of a number of building blocks. Throughout the automation of services, we will first focus on the design of automated services, where we will review the user service design and technology, and what is required in order to constitute a good automated service experience. Besides that, you will also need a number of processes, and that focuses on the delivery of automated services. It's not just good enough to make an automated service once, you need to be able to support that. And in order to do that, there are three main process clusters. Automated deployment deals with everything that the user experiences the first time that they consume a service. But then you also need to support it while people are using the service. They might get into problems or they might not have the information that they need. And that's why we have service delivery automation. This is the day-to-day support that is provided by organizations that are delivering services. Last but not least, we would also like to improve services, and that is why we have Serendipity Management. Serendipity means something good that you don't expect beforehand. And through Serendipity Management, we can really work to make sure that people actually like to use the self-service portal. So that's how we can use the service automation framework. If you have any questions or would like to receive additional information on how this model works, we have written a number of white papers that you can download from our website. So let's have a look at what the service automation framework does. And this is a really important slide to really understand how service automation works and how you can start to deliver automated services in your organization as well. On the left-hand side of this slide, you see what we refer to as a traditional service provider. A traditional service provider delivers services based on a number of interactions between the service provider on the one hand and the user at the other hand. Let's take a very simple example, and somebody would like to request a new parking permit. What that means is that you probably will need to collect a number of documents. You will need to go to a government building and submit all of these documents. The officer will probably review all of those documents and see if they're correct. If one of those documents is not correct, you will be sent home and you will need to recome again. After that, you file for the parking permit. It will take some time and you will receive another message that you can pick up your parking permit, let's say after a week. So you see how a service is constituted. A service, if you break it down to its smallest parts, always consists of a number of steps. It is actually a process. And every process is very similar. If there's thousands of parking permits that need to be delivered every single month, every time the process will be more or less the same. And that's really good news because that means that the process can be automated. So what we would like to do when we do service automation is that we would like to move to the situation on the right. And you see that it is very similar to the picture we draw on the left, but there's one main difference. The main difference is that we will build a self-service portal or a self-service interface between the service provider, which is the government on the one hand side, and the user, who's the actual citizen or service consumer at the other side. And by building this self-service portal, we build in an additional layer between the service provider and the user. And every kind of communication is exchanged through that self-service portal. This will make it easier, more reliable, it's always trackable, and most importantly, it's more cost efficient. So how would that work within the context of a government service? So we've talked now a little bit about some of the basic ideas and theories behind service automation. So how would a government benefit from this? Do you think that a government is a particular service organization? If you think about that a little bit more closely, you can actually see that it is. Because if you think about the role of government in any country and any region in the world, whether you're living in the US, in Europe, or somewhere in Asia, there's always a strong responsibility of the government to take care of its citizens. And traditionally, we could say that the purpose of governments is twofold. First of all, the government needs to represent the people and involve citizens in making decisions. That's the whole reason we have elections, because we would like the government to represent ourselves. We won't go into that in detail today. That's a completely different field of study. But the second main purpose of a government is to provide administrative services and provide goods and services to the citizens of a country. Think, for instance, about the roads or the networks that they need to build. But we will focus in this session today specifically on the service provider role of the government. And the government provides you services on a day-to-day basis. Some services you might not like paying your taxes, but some other services you would be very keen to use, like for instance, getting a marriage certificate. So all of these fall within the responsibility of the government itself. And because the government, in essence, is really a service provider, we could say that we could automate services in the following way. In this next slide, we zoom in a little bit closer on the role of the government as a service provider. And basically what the government does is that they provide a number of different departments. Let's say the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of Infrastructure. And each of these different government departments provides a number of services. And you will see all of those services, or at least a subset of them, on the right side of the slide. So for instance, very common services that governments provide are civil services, parks and recreation, housing services, education services, roads and repairs, etc., etc. This list is actually very long, and especially for larger countries, there can literally be tens of thousands of services that governments provide. So how can we think about releasing those services or providing those services to citizens? What the government would like to do is provide a single point of contact for citizens so that they can interact with the government. And whether that is a higher government or a local government or a company that has specifically been set up to provide services to citizens doesn't really matter. What we really would like to know that as a citizen, I know where to go in case I would like to get a specific service. And if we take the model that we drew in one of the previous slides a little bit closer and think about how automation could work in government, it is that we would need to build a portal between those different departments of the government and the users itself. That will make it very easy because it means that a user can interact with the citizen portal, request any of the services that we see on the right, and then receive the services back. So no matter whether I would like to get a license to build a house, or would like to get a marriage certificate, or would like to get a new driver's license, all of those services could be requested throughout the same self-service portal. And that's really the objective when we talk about the design of e-government portals. So how do we achieve this goal? Obviously, this is not the first webinar and not the first question that has ever been asked on how to achieve that. And we see that a lot of governments have already started to implement digital services. Some governments call it e-government, some governments call it government as a platform, GAAP. We also refer to it as citizens apps or even digital transformation or a service government. All of these concepts are same or in similar words for the same thing. Basically, what we would like to do is we would like to automate the service delivery function of the government itself. So in the next couple of minutes, we will review how you can do that. What we have found in our work at Cybiant and in the research that we've done with the service automation framework is that although many leaders, and with leaders we specifically mean politicians, advocate for increased automation in government services, there is very little guidance available that explains how this could be done. And with the service automation framework, we really try to provide local governments with a practical approach towards delivering automated services, as well as some tools that can be used to design and deliver these services. So in the next couple of slides, I will walk you through the 6 steps that we've devised towards automation. And these are specifically tailored towards governments, but they can also be used within other corporations as well. And these steps are first to define services from a citizen point of view. Subsequently, to bundle services from different government departments into service catalogs. Then build service automation blueprints for each individual services, translates those blueprints and scripts into the self-service portal that we will see, and then facilitates citizens to actively use them. So in the next couple of slides, I will walk you through these steps individually, and I will keep it brief to give you an overview of what these 6 steps are. First of all, we would need to define services from a user point of view. So it's not the government that devises which services need to be provided, but you need to think it from the perspective of a user. So a very good example, as you see here on the slide, is the second example. As a citizen of a particular city, I would like to request or renew my parking permits and submit changes in case I buy a new car. That is a user-centric description. It describes exactly that if you are a citizen, what you would like to do on the government portal. And based upon that description, you can start to design the services. As we've mentioned before, there are literally hundreds or even thousands of services that the government provides. So the next step that you need to do is to compose service catalogs where you bundle a number of similar services together. In most cases, each of these service catalogs is managed by a separate government entity, and we will say that we set up a separate service catalog for them. So for instance, if we look at the left hand of the slide, we see a number of common civil affairs offices, applying for passports, applying for driver's licenses, requesting marriage licenses, all have to do with civil affairs. And very similar to that, to the example that you see here, you can start to work to build service catalogs for different government departments. And that's really useful because you can still keep the different departments, but they each manage a different section of the service catalog. And they also own the services that are in that service catalog by themselves. As soon as we've written our service catalogs, the next step is that we will start to compose service automation blueprints for each and every individual service. And on the slide in front of you, you see an example of how a service to request a new passport would look like. At the top of the slide, you see the user, and the user interacts with the self-service portal. The user files a request for a passport and receives a notification back that the passport has been requested. At the back end, we have a number of automated processes. First of all, we need to validate the identity of the requester. We subsequently need to make sure that the passport is produced, and we need to release it. All of these things need to be written down into workflows and scripts that can be automatically be delivered towards users themselves. As you see, the self-service portal is the layer in between, and all forms of communication will go through that particular self-service portal. So service automation blueprinting is a whole technique on itself. And in the webinar today, we don't really have the time to dive into it in too much detail, but I've written a short little blog on our website that you can read to understand more of how this process works. So the key notification here is that you would really need to compose a service automation blueprint for every service that the government provides, because that will make it able for you to start automating the services in the next step. In the next step, we are going to translate the workflows that we've seen into a self-service portal by themselves. And what you see on the next slide is an example of the self-service portal of the city of Amsterdam, where I'm originally from. On this self-service portal, you see the same categories that we've discussed in the previous slide. You see parking services, waste and recycling services, registering for a job or storage stay, or immigration and different registration. What that means is that we will have a different service catalog behind each of these buttons. And in the demo that I will start to present a little bit later, you will see that we will follow the exact same structure. So in this fourth step is maybe the most important one, because this is where we really start to design the technology based on the service automation blueprints and the service catalogs that we've discussed previously. In step number 5, we need to make sure that we facilitate the active use of these services. We need to make citizens aware that these automated services exist and that they can use them on a 24/7 hour basis. The key to success of a self-service portal is to make sure that people actually understand it. So you would need to do a marketing campaign or a citizen campaign that will inform people on how to use the self-service portal. And then last but not least, launching in the self-service portal is one, but we would like to make sure that we continually use the technology that we have to exceed the user expectations. So the service automation framework provides this framework to consistently exceed those user expectations. And that's really the last step. Wouldn't it be great that before, let's say 2 months before your driver's license expires, you get an automated notification by email or by SMS? Most governments today don't provide this kind of functionality, but if you deliver automated services, you actually can, because you will know exactly when the driver's license has been issued, and you also know exactly when the driver's license will be expiring. You also have all the contact details because the whole driver's license was requested through the portal. So all of these are examples of how you could work to make sure that those services get increased over time. So let's recap a little bit of what we talked about in the last couple of sections. In the last sections, I've presented you with the 6 main steps that you could use towards the automation of government services. We talked about each of these steps into detail, and we started with defining the services, putting them into different service catalogs, making them into blueprints, and then translating those blueprints into workflows and scripts on a self-service portal. The last 2 steps have to do with user experience. So we would need to make sure that people actually use the self-service portal, and also to make sure that they exceed the user expectations on a day-to-day basis. So those are the 6 steps that we use in the service automation framework in order to automate government services. So that's the theoretical part of this particular session. In this session, next section, we will look a little bit at a demo on how you can do that. The platform that we are using for this demo is called Summit AI, and we are able to access it by this link. I will now take a moment to stop this slide sharing and move towards the browser in order to access that. If it's correct, you now see a demo of a self-service portal based on the Summit AI platform. And if you think a little bit closer and deeper about the slide I just showed you from the city of Amsterdam, you can see that it's built in exactly the same way. We see that we have a number of building blocks, which are all still in their early design. And what we're going to do in the next couple of minutes is that we're going to adjust each of these building blocks so that they match the different services that we would like to have. And in order to do that, we would need to build different service catalogs for each of these different building blocks. So for instance, civil services, parking services, immigration, each of them would get their own service catalog. So the way that we do that is I will have a administrator account. So obviously citizens won't see that, but I at the backend can configure everything. So one of the first things that I will do is that I will start to build a service catalog for a particular service department. For instance, we could say that I would like to create a service catalog Oh, it's a live demo, so I would need to authenticate again. Give me a second. There we go. We're back into the same platform that we've just seen. I went over to the service catalog function, and that is where we would like to build a new service catalog. So what we would like to do, for instance, is provide a catalog with information items. And then we would say that it's for the Department of Civil Services. We choose a category. I'll put it into facilities for now. We choose a category to do that. Let's say it's transport, and we make a service catalog name. And for instance, we say that this is specifically for parking services. The catalog type would be this, and through parking services, we could say that we would like the services to request new parking permits. We add that to the service catalog and also link it to the category. In the next section, we start to build a form. And within this form, we can add different fields that would be required for each item in the service catalog. So this is how we do that. We then get a preview of the parking services. And I will show you a little bit later how we can build a workflow around that. So we've now added that towards our service catalog. I can even give it some images and dependencies between different other departments, but I'm going to leave that for now because of the sake of time and the demonstration. So what we would need to be building afterwards is the service automation blueprint, as we've just seen. And the way that we do that is by designing a workflow. So I'll show you the workflow configuration through which we could start making the request of a parking permit. So in this next section, we will start to design the workflows through which we can request automated parking services. So we go to our service catalog, we select the service that we've just made, and we will go towards the parking services that we've just seen, which is under transportation. Oh. So I use a particular workflow that we have, and here you see the start and design of the workflow. So in this simple workflow, we would say that requesting a parking permit consists of a number of steps. However, in this case, we would still need to have 3 layers of approval in order to assign the parking permit. And that's not something we would like. We would like to reduce a number of the approvals, but also want to adjust and add a number of different services that we're using within the parking permit. So the way that we can do that is by adding the properties of the different service. So in this particular section, we will make the particular, and if we've updated, you now see that there's only 1 approval needed. So somebody at the back end will still make a manual approval, but if you remove this level of approval as well, the workflow will be executed automatically, meaning that the parking permit will be issued if all of the fields are filled correctly. After we've made the design of the workflow, the next section is that we would like to make sure that people can request them. And what we would do is that we would add a new service request in all of the different workflows so that people can actually request it. And I'll showcase you how that works. As soon as we go back to the self-service portal, you will see that there is a section available. Oh. You will see that there's a section available where we can request the new parking services. So here is it again. So if we would like to submit a request for a new parking service, we will go towards the parking that we just made. We select the parking and the transportation, section, and there we can do the new transportation request that we've just made. We need to fill in the details of the form that we've just built, and then we can submit it and it will be executed automatically. So what I've just done is give you a very high level overview of what it means to build a self-service portal within existing technology. And if you take the steps that we've just done, you can start to build this for all of the services that you have. And you also have a dashboard in which you can monitor whether all of these services are being provided. So these are some of the first steps that you would need to do in order to start building your self-service portal for government purposes. I have a couple of closing slides before we move to the question and answer section. So what we've just done is that we've built a self-service portal in which we can make sure that each of those different departments have their own section on the website and through which they can start delivering services to their citizens. And that's a very short overview of how you can build a self-service portal in Summit AI. We're almost out of time, but we do have a couple of minutes left for a couple of questions. So I will go to the question log right now, and if you have any questions, you can ask them right here. Please type them into the Q&A session right now. I see a number of questions coming in. First question is it mandatory to use the Summit AI platform for the automation of services? The answer is definitely no. We've just used this particular demo to give you an overview of what is happening and how you could easily do this. There are a lot of other good providers out there, but this is just one that we have experience with in order to configure it. The second question that comes in says, is there a workshop available as well? The answer is definitely yes. So if you would like to learn a little bit more on how do you build these service catalogs or how do you do this automation blueprinting, we offer a number of workshops. We even have a certification training, which is a full 2-day course, which will tell you everything about service automation. So if you're really interested in this topic, I think that's a great start to dive into the materials a little bit more. The next question that I see coming in is, can we request a demo? Yes, the environment that I've just shown you is a demo environment. So if you would like to play around with this backend a little bit yourself, please reach out to me after this webinar and I will set up a demo environment for you as well, so that you can see all of the different functions and you can start to design your own automated services as well. So thank you so much for these questions. I think this is really useful. If you have any other questions, now would be a good moment to ask them, or otherwise we're gonna close the webinar because we're almost out of time. No, in that case, we move towards some of closing remarks. First of all, I would really like to thank you for your time to watch the webinar today. I hope this was useful, and I think it provided a good overview with some new theory, together with some practical work that you can do in order to actually start building your own self-service portal. If you would like to have more information about this particular material, or you would like to request a demo environment, please reach out to us at the contact address that you see here on the screen, or reach out to me personally, either through LinkedIn or the email that we have. We will upload this the video as soon as it's been processed, so you can rewatch any of the sections at any moment of your preference. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again on any of our next upcoming webinars.